We'll do a question and answer panel now. So if all of our panelists could turn on their cameras and their speakers. While we are getting set up, we've had a few questions coming in, and I just wanted to do a quick share of our publications. We have a number of different publications from our oil spill team here. One of the questions was about a number of ways to respond to dolphins and whale strandings. There's an app for that, and I would just like to highlight some of that information that we have for each of the Gulf states. So we've got that. We also have a marine mammal publication, but we have many other synthesis publications as well. I just wanted to briefly show you those, and then we'll get into that after our question and answer panel. So I think we've got everybody ready. So we have two other members, as Ryan mentioned, from the National Marine Mammal Foundation that are joining us. We have Lori Schwacke and Celeste Perry. So they will also be answering questions. They are very part of and very familiar with all of the research that has been discussed here. So I'll start off with, I guess, the question for, I think, anybody. Can oil exposure be detected non-grossly and later in time in any stranded individual, and how?
Yeah, that's a big one. I think we're still trying to work out, along with the broader toxicology community, what that sort of they call it a pharmacokinetic model of how the body takes in oil, and as it moves through different organs and into your blood and spreads out into tissues, how it changes over time. And I don't think anybody would say that we have a really great handle on it invertebrates in general, nonetheless marine mammals. And so it's hard to directly detect PAHs or other oil chemicals in a body after time. So I think we're mostly dependent on trying to look for some of these oil specific health effects that we were talking about. For example, the lung disease, or the adrenal cortex thinning. Some of the immune parameters that Sylvain mentioned are great because you can actually draw blood from a living animal instead of relying on a necropsy. So I think those are some of the things that we sort of rely on at this point to try to figure out exposure and effect.
Yeah, I would add that several of those chemicals that are in oil are broken down, so they're metabolized, so they don't stay forever. However, their effects may be long lasting.
That's a great point. Anyone else want to add to that? We've got plenty of questions. I'll keep them coming. Let's see, publications. Oh, so was satellite tagging acoustic telemetry data collected during the NERDA and Barataria Bay studies available to help interpret changes in the movement and habitat use elucidated by stable isotopes and some of the other data collected?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. That's exactly what we did. So you can look at those three publications where Carl was the lead author, and he worked with ourselves and Brian Balmer to do exactly what you're saying, to compare stable isotopes and look at dolphin movements to put all of those pieces together. And then in 2017, we also tagged dolphins further north in Barataria Bay to start asking how those dolphins might move in relation to low salinity effects, to start to answer some questions about that proposed diversion project. So that work is published in PLOS One this year, so you can find that.
Great, thank you. I have one for Sarah. What level of HAZWOPER training does your crew have? 24 hours, 48 hours? Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we get the initial 24-hour HAZWOPER certification, which is primarily for individuals who will occasionally come into contact with hazardous materials, including oil. but we're not necessarily involved in cleanup efforts or consistently exposed. So it's just a little bit shorter than the 40-hour. And then each year we do an 8-hour refresher training. And it's really important for us to stay up to date and current on those for the work we do. And also 24-hour certification is really long and nobody wants to do that every year. So it's motivation to stay current. Yeah.
Absolutely. That's great. I'm going to kind of combine two questions here. And so how are groups like the Stranding Network, including Texas State Aquarium and SeaWorld Texas, paid for oil spill response work? And are there pre-established agreements or contracts?
So it's a very straightforward question with a very convoluted answer. So because disaster events are, require immediate response, there aren't always clear funds that are set up to be dispersed for that. But oftentimes, stranding networks or designee organizations may use their own resources initially, but then be reimbursed through contract or subcontract work through NOAA. I know NOAA does have emergency funds for some things like hurricane out of habitat response and some other things, but often it'll be the responsible party that reimburses that, again, through contract work that's later established. But initially from the moment it happens, sometimes that's just using the resources that you have in place already.
Thank you. Yes, never an easy question.
No.
We've got a few questions on little details, and I'd like to refer a lot of y'all to some of our publications about how you can contact Sarah and other stranding networks throughout the Gulf. It's very important, and we really appreciate everybody that falls into that. I have a question about restoration. So what restoration projects can increase population of dolphins so that they recover to the blue line? So they mean the blue line that Ryan was talking about. So how can we get those populations back up? And if you have any other restoration projects you'd like to talk about.
I guess I'll talk about this a little bit. Yeah, it's a really great question, right? And I think that everybody is working really hard in terms of not just Deepwater, but some of the other NRDA cases around the country to figure out what is the right scope for each of the events. So for Deepwater and for these other cases, one of the main things is helping people like Sarah do their thing in terms of enhancing stranding networks and trying to make those efforts more robust, more reliable, and get them what they need to and help us answer some of the questions we have for research, which in turn can be used to help those populations, right? But a lot of the efforts are also essentially trying to address other threats, right? So in areas with a lot of industry where oil spills are likely to happen, you also have other threats like fishing pressure. And so some of the restoration projects are aimed at, can we help disentangle animals more efficiently? Can we encourage programs with fishers to try to reduce the number of entanglements and that sort of thing? So those are just some of the ideas, but I would say that it's a hard question, and I think that a lot of the difficulty with marine mammals comes from the fact that restoration projects for NRDAs don't have a long history of including marine mammal restoration, and so we're sort of working in a framework of oiled marsh acres or fisheries impacts. And so now we're all trying to work together to figure out how to make the system work for marine mammals as well.
I would like to add to
please,
that.
Go ahead.
Reducing multiple stressors or additional stressors is certainly a way to avoid some delays in the recovery. And I'd like to put in a plug for Celeste and her group that have been a great job at educating the next generation, raising awareness, and I think raising awareness, reducing our reliance on fossil fuel will reduce the oil exploration and will reduce the number of spills in the future. I know it's not short term, but Celeste, maybe a word or two on the outreach efforts associated with the CARMA efforts.
Yeah, absolutely. We worked hard to convey the information that was found through the CARMA Consortium to a lot of different audiences. We tried to get it out to the scientific community, to the general public, doing webinars like this, but we really focused a lot of our youth outreach on working with the Girl Scouts and then other youth organizations. And we did some really fun workshops where we did a mock dolphin health assessment and walked the students through step by step all the things that happened during an assessment. And we shared some of the videos there that were part of the Dispatches from the Gulf video series, which are still available online. You can actually see the process of going through one of these health assessments. And we also did a demonstration on how to care for oiled animals and how you would kind of clean up a spill, and the kids got to try cleaning up a spill and see how hard it really is. So yeah, hopefully we reached a lot of different audiences with that, and we know we got a lot of great feedback about our youth outreach stuff. And the great thing is that a lot of the information that we've developed working with Sea Grant and working with the GOMRI funding, we've directly translated to a program that we call Dolphin Doctor. It's basically all about marine mammal veterinary medicine and research. And so that's still available. If anybody on the line wants to schedule a virtual workshop with our group, then please let us know. You can reach us at outreach@nmmf.org.
Fantastic. Thank you, Celeste. Yes, we always think that outreach and education is incredibly important. And we love being able to work with all y'all. We have many more resources online. I know we're sort of running a little bit over time, so if you can join us, we'll answer another question or two. If not, we please ask that you fill out the evaluation form. The link is in the chat, and that way we can get a little bit more feedback from y'all. We really appreciate that. I will also include, or I believe included in the chat is links to our oil spill team publications that we're able to share with everyone. Oh, there we go. The evaluation link is up in the chat box. So if you could do that. So let's do, I think we can do two more questions. And we have one for Sylvain. Is it possible that the immune response observed in the Barataria Basin has a genetic link?
It is indeed possible, but it's unlikely given that when we expose mice in the lab that all have the same genetics, we find very similar results. And when we take cells from Sarasota Bay and we expose them to oil in the lab in vitro in petri dishes, we find very similar results. So it is possible, but it's very unlikely, I think.
Good to know. And then double checking my questions. I think the last one is, how do you compare the degree and duration of exposure to the Barataria Basin dolphin population with wide-ranging oceanic whales? Is there a way to do that?
Sounds like a great one for you, Lori.
I was just waiting to see if you're going to fish it to me. Yeah, it's really tough, right? But what we did for the population models was basically look at surface oil maps, and we looked at the degree of oiling in Barataria Bay, and then also looked at oiling, the duration and the degree of surface oil in the offshore populations. And so we developed an index of as bad as Barataria, and that was how we tried to quantify the exposure for the offshore populations, assuming that given that exposure in Barataria Bay that they would have the same effects. That is one thing, though, for future research. It's really tough to quantify exposure in these animals. We couldn't put little dosimeters on them to estimate what kind of exposure they're getting, but hopefully maybe in the future that is something we can do. We can get remote tags that can measure that sort of thing and really get a better understanding of what and how much animals are being exposed to. Just keep in mind, though, that these animals are swimming right at the surface where some of the most volatile chemicals from the oil are, and they're inhaling those chemicals. And so we think about the people's exposure that are out there doing cleanup. Well, the dolphins are there 24/7 every day and breathing right at the surface. So it is a fairly extreme exposure.
Great to know, and that's a great question. So that covers all of our questions. I would like to say a huge thank you to all of our speakers. I really appreciate your expertise and your time being here. I'd like to make a shout out to my comms communication team. They're doing all of the behind the scenes work, and I really appreciate that. If you could fill out the evaluation, we would very much appreciate your response and thoughts on that. And then finally, we will be posting, this is streamed to Facebook, so there'll be a copy on Facebook, and we will be posting this to YouTube as well if you ever would like to go back and reference it. We'll talk to the speakers, see if we can get some of their slides on our website as well. And if you have further questions or interest in information, please check out all these researchers' work as well as our oil spill publications. My last plug is we are sending out any of those publications for free. So if you are interested or could use those for a classroom or teaching, we would love to share them with you. So please, I'll put that link in the chat as well. But we're trying to share as much of this wonderful information that everyone has done over the last 11 years. So with that, I will say thank you, and thank you all for joining, and I appreciate your time.
You.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Thanks
Danny.
for hosting.
Absolutely. Bye, y'all. Have a great day.